All right, now that we have all three of our pages correctly linked to a style sheet and we have the start of the style sheet going, we're going to go ahead and actually make a style sheet for Bubble Under. We obviously do not want all of our paragraphs to be bold and red, so I'm going to delete that out, and so should you. And we're going to start with a clean style sheet. So this is in your handout, starting to build our style sheet. So the first thing that you do is, or one of the first changes that you usually do is to define the site's default styling. The typeface that's used is quite often the one thing that people want to control. So the default of Times New Roman is probably not what you were looking for. So to control the overall typeface for everything you see, and then you can tweak individual things later, we're going to actually give the rule to this to the body tag. So let's just start with the word body and do our curly brace, go down a few lines and close our curly brace. Now we're going to put each rule inside of here. The reason we're doing the body, and I'm going to jump to the contact page. Here is the body. Here's the end of the body. What's inside of the body tags? If you're yelling at your monitor, everything you see, you are correct. Everything that we see on a web page is contained within the opening and closing body tags. The head tags are just for search engines, for your tabs up at the top to give a title. They have nothing to do with what people see on your page. The body tags, however, whoops, I just collapsed all that. Everything between the body tags is what you see. So in our style sheet, if we make some rules for the body, it's going to control everything on the page. So what we're going to do, the selector is the font hyphen family, colon, and now you start listing the font that you want. We're going to start with Verdana and make a semicolon at the end. Even if you only have one rule in here, that's a good practice, because later if you go on to add more rules and you don't have this semicolon, it's going to break and not work. So right now we said everything we see should be in Verdana. That's the name of a font. Save this CSS, jump to your index file, and run it in Chrome. Look at that. That's a completely different font. This is now Verdana. It had been defaulting to whatever Chrome wanted, which appeared to be Times New Roman, but now it's in Verdana. So back to your style sheet. The great thing is that Verdana is pretty common. However, it is not necessarily on everybody's computer. So what you want to do is make options for the person's browser to use if they don't have Verdana. So you give it a first, second, third, fourth choice, whatever. Verdana is our first choice. But before we end there, so inside that semicolon, before we end this rule, we're going to separate our different choices with a comma. Helvetica is our second choice. Our third choice, if they don't have Helvetica, is Arial. And then finally, you give them a generic option if they don't have any of those fonts. So the generic option that we want is Sans Serif. And Sans has an S, not just sans serif, it's sans serif, and it's hyphenated. Serifs are the little feet that you see on letter forms. So what we're looking at in code, this actually has serifs. So all these little feet at the bottom of the H, at the bottom of the L, at the bottom of the A, the R, the I, the L, those are all serifs. Whereas the font that we're using on here, Verdana, Helvetica, Arial, these are sans serif. They don't have the little feet. Sans serif is much easier to read on a screen than serif type. So that's why we tend to use it, especially for our body copy on websites. Back here, that is the stacking order. Use Verdana. If you don't have it, use Helvetica. If you don't have that, use Arial. If you don't have that, use whatever sans serif font your computer has. So that's the stacking order. And when we go to Chrome and refresh our site or do a run, it's not going to look any different because we did have, or I did Personally, I had Verdana, so it worked. Maybe you didn't at home. Maybe now by writing the rest of this code and giving it the option of Helvetica or Arial or a generic sans serif, it's now working for you. So that is how we got an overall to work on our whole entire page by putting it in the body section. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here. So that's the rule for our body. We're done with that one. Now we're going to style our headings. We have some heading ones. So we're going to tell those how to behave. So a heading 1, and then opening curly brace, return, return, closing curly brace. And now put your rule inside of here. We want our heading 1s to look just a little bit different. Instead of being Verdana, we're hoping to use Trebuchet MS. Here is a tricky thing. Whenever a font has 2 names, like Avant-Garde, Helvetica New, Times New Roman, if it has more than 1 word in its name, you have to put quotation marks around it. Single names like Verdana, Helvetica, Arial are fine. Let's do the font family, colon, and the one that we want to use is Trebuchet MS. And because it has 2 words or more than 1 word, it could have 3 or 4, it has to be in quotes, and then a comma. Arial is our second choice, Helvetica is our third choice, and if all else fails, sans serif, and then end with a semicolon. Our first choice, however, is Trebuchet MS. Let's save the CSS. It's important that you save it before you go and look, and then either run View in Chrome or pop back to Chrome and refresh your page. As I refreshed it, you should have seen the bubble under change. It went from being Verdana to being Trebuchet MS. So just a reminder, if as you're making these changes, you're not seeing them populate in your HTML pages, remember that you have to save the CSS page before you move on to try to view the results in your index, contact, or about page. If you didn't hit save, nothing has been changed. Also, remember when you go to those pages in your browser to hit refresh. So if it still looks the same, you have to remember to hit refresh so it goes and gets the latest version. Other times when things don't work, it's because you actually have an error in your code. So you forgot the closing curly brace. You forgot the semicolon right here. You need to end all of your rules between each one with a semicolon. Make sure that exists. After we type in a full page of code, I'm going to show you that there is a CSS validator online, just like the HTML validator that I showed you. It's from the same website. So you can upload your code and it will check and say, hey, there's an error. You didn't close something correctly, or on line 6, you forgot the curly brace, something like that. So there are ways to check as well. So if you move through your packet, I'm now on the page that says a mixture of new styles, and we're going to change the look of our site a little bit more by adding even more styles to the body and a bunch of other things. So we are going to go back to the body. So far we've told it, and the body is everything we see on the page. So these are universal rules overall, and then when we want to get more specific, heading 1, we can change up individual things. So overall, we want it to have a font family of Verdana. What we're going to add next is the background color. So the background color, again, when you get these auto-populates, you can arrow down, hit your enter key, and it will auto-type it for you. That helps with not making mistakes or forgetting hyphen. The background color that we're going to use is a hex code. So it's the hashtag E as in elephant 2, E as in elephant, D dog, FF Frank Frank, and then a semicolon, and then go down a line for your next rule. The next one we're going to do is our line height. That's how much room there is or how much spacing. So a line height of 150% would be the same as 1.5 in Microsoft Word, a line and a half. Double spacing is 200%. So we're going to do line space hyphen height, line height, colon, 125% semicolon, because we're separating one rule from the next. And then padding, we're going to do 15 pixels. PX is pixels. Padding is the amount of breathing room around something. So if you make a box and put text inside it with no padding, your letters are going to start right on the left edge of your box and they're going to run smack into the right end of the box. You've seen that in some bad designs and layouts where people have their type right up against the edges of the box. Padding allows some breathing room. So 15 pixels of padding would indent your type by 15 pixels all the way around in that box. Top, bottom, left, and right when it's written this way. So padding of 15 pixels. Before we move on, I think sometimes it's safe to check what you've done before you get too far in so you can see if you have errors. Another nice thing when you're in Notepad++ and you have a CSS file, we can see our extension right there, it lights up similarly to the way HTML does. So we can see that all of our selectors are lighting up in this light blue. And if for some reason we spelled one wrong or we didn't have the hyphen in there like it's needed, do you see how it changed? It's just black. That's kind of an indication to me something about this is wrong. Oh, I forgot the hyphen. Now it looks right. So save your file and let's just go back, either run this in Chrome or if you already have it open in Chrome, hit refresh. Look at that, we now have a blue background because we have stylized the entire body to have a background of this light blue. All right, back to our CSS file. Our heading 1, we've already told it, here's the heading 1, and the rules are inside the curly braces. We've already told it what font we want it to be. Now we're going to give it an actual size. So we're going to say font size. And instead of giving it a number or a percent, we're going to use these generic terms of small, medium, large, extra large. And the browser will interpret that and scale it accordingly. So X hyphen large is the font size. End with your semicolon. Don't forget that. Save our style. And I'm going to refresh here. Heading 1, extra large. That's what this looks like now. It actually got smaller, which is interesting. Again, it's not a definitive number. It's not like saying it should be 60 pixels or 6 Ms or 300%. It's a generic listing of X large. I honestly don't use that one much, but that's the one that the book came up with, so we're going to follow the rules. All right. After your closing curly brace for the heading 1, go down a few lines just so you have some cleanliness here. We're going to make a rule for our list items. Remember those? Everything that is an LI shows up in either an unordered or an ordered list. So it's either the things that get numbered 1, 2, 3 or get bulleted. So our list item, curly brace, enter, enter, closing curly brace. The rule for our list item is that the font size should be small. And if we go and check that out, we used a list item, sorry about that, we used a list item right here in our navigation. So when I hit refresh, it got smaller. That's what happened when I did refresh. Hopefully you saw that. So list items are now in a font size of small. All right, go after your closing curly brace and go down a little further. We're now going to make a rule for our heading 2s. So opening curly brace, closing curly brace. The rule for our heading 2s, the color that we want to use is blue. So color, colon, blue, semicolon to separate the rules. Font size for this is going to be medium. And the font weight is going to be normal, meaning not bold, not light, it's medium. So scroll that up a little bit. So these are the rules we just did for our heading 2, color, font size, and font weight. So we should now expect that when we go to our page and refresh it, first of all, we have to save our CSS. It's critical that we do that. Go to our page and hit refresh. I believe that this, welcome to our super duper, is our heading 2. Let's hit refresh. Yes, it was. So notice it is no longer bold. It's now blue, font size medium, and font weight normal. It's no longer bolded. And let's pop back. We have one more rule to make, and that's for how our paragraphs should behave. Whoops. So we do the letter P, and then curly brace, closing curly brace. And the rule for our paragraphs is font size, use a hyphen there, small, and a semicolon. Sorry, my fingers are in the way here. And color of navy. It's also pretty rare that we use all these generic terms. Usually we're using hex codes. So all of our paragraphs should be small and in navy. Save your CSS, go back to your page in Chrome and refresh it, and we should see a change here because this is a paragraph, and here. Or no, actually that's our tagline. We should just see it down here. Oh, it was both. So we now see much smaller type in navy color. All right, let's save our CSS and take a break before we move on to the next video. We've done a good job of making a CSS page. Save that and we'll move on.